I promised you a round 2 of Unicorn Overlord information, and when I make you a promise, I deliver. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone. As I always say, if you enjoy this video or my coverage, a like and a subscription would be very much appreciated. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, if you would be interested in joining in as a member of the army in the upcoming campaign that we will be streaming live on release of Unicorn Overlord March 8th, then consider joining my Patreon at the appropriate tier, and you will guarantee yourself a slot in the army with a custom character that you get to design. If you do decide to support in this way, you'll be helping me out directly, and it would mean the world, so thank you so much if you do, and for everyone else, thank you as well. Now then, on to the info. The topic for today is twofold. First off, we're going to be talking about some interesting points about map exploration, either new things that we hadn't really known about before, or some extra information about things we had discussed previously. A little bit of a short section. The bulk of the video is going to be other miscellaneous details, pretty much largely about combat, that I was able to pick out of the barrage, honestly, of pre-release footage that we've seen from various different outlets and YouTube videos in the last 48 hours. Like I said, that'll be the bulk of the video, and I think there's going to be some interesting stuff in there that you all are going to enjoy. But first, let's get that map exploration stuff done. Points of interest, such as this carved stone face, can be interacted with to gain resources, lore, and more. We knew previously that you'd be able to find little items and things like that, little glowing spots on the map that you could pick up just to get a little bit of a boost as you were running around the map, but there will absolutely be other things that you can explore that are a little bit more in-depth, might have a little bit more going on in terms of the rewards that they give you than we maybe saw before. There might also be different houses with different characters, NPCs, other notable locations, so keep your eyes peeled. You never know what you might be able to explore. Speaking of those resources, it seems most, if not all, resources that you find around the world are used as quest objectives, delivery targets, hello Death Stranding fans, I'm amongst you, or upgrade materials for towns and cities. I haven't really seen anything that seems like you're just going to pick up random experience boosting books or equipment or things like that. It's all wood or food items or linens, things like that. Of course, this could absolutely be wrong, and I may have just seen a very small slice of what there is to see. We're just going off of the pre-release material after all. But for now, pick up those resources, deliver them, upgrade your stuff, but look to other more substantive content for better rewards. We have, of course, also seen enemies who will pursue you across the map to engage you in battle, brigands, and the like. But now, we've also seen mages who will actually teleport directly to you if you give them the chance. I think of the witches from Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valencia, and how they would just teleport on top of you and be absolutely terrifying. So mage jump scares, potentially incoming, and potentially unavoidable, depending on how far their teleport range is and how aggressive they are with it. But it's going to be a good time, I'm sure. Bad time, maybe. We'll see. Finally, it's been stated by numerous outlets with early preview access that there are a variety of paths you can take to pursue quest objectives. To me, this makes it sound more like you'll have a linear path to follow with just different branching approaches to it, as opposed to the more traditional idea of an open world that was being implied by earlier videos from Vanillaware. Obviously, I can't say for sure until I actually get my hands on the game, but if you're concerned about how a true open world would be handled, you may be able to relax a bit. I know that was a point of contention for some people in my comments, so that might not exactly be what's happening here. And honestly, I would have been surprised if it was. You know, you talk about an open world game, and I think of the Lands Between in Elden Ring, right? And I don't really know how you would approach that from a turn-based strategy RPG standpoint with a seemingly linear story progression. So having specific objectives that you need to go towards and a number of different paths to get there, but they all go to the same point, that makes a little bit more sense to me. From what we've seen, these paths vary from choosing what type of enemy and terrain you'll have to pass through, to potentially taking ships and other alternate paths other than just land routes to bypass them entirely. We'll have to see just how in-depth this gets, but apparently the world map is huge, and early access previewers saw a minuscule amount of it from what they could tell in their first 4 hours with the game, so very exciting. Now, with map discussion out of the way, let's move on to those various combat details, and I'm going to be completely honest with you here, there's just a hodgepodge, a smattering of different things that I've noted. No particular order to this, we're just going to jump into it and see where it takes us. First off, and perhaps most importantly for a variety of people, there will be difficulty levels in the game. It has not been stated exactly what those difficulty levels will be, nor what they affect, but we know that there will at least presumably be an easy, normal, and hard mode. Potentially even more difficult things beyond that, we'll have to see. I will most likely be playing on hard if there's not something higher than that when we get the game, but if you're someone who is a little wary of the trials and tribulations that a strategy game like this might entail, especially if you've come off of Vanillaware's other titles that are not nearly as in-depth in that way, there should be easier modes for you to engage with that should be more approachable for you. We've also seen an item called Hallowed Corn Ash, an item which allows you to continue your game when you get a game over due to an enemy taking your home base, the time limit on a map expiring, or all of your units being defeated. This, of course, does seem similar to the Chariot system of Tactics Ogre or the Rewind mechanic of Fire Emblem, and it will allow you to prevent a total reload in the worst-case scenario. From what we've seen in screenshots, there's at least 3 of these at a time that you can hold, although where you get them from, how expensive they may be to buy, how rare they are to find, etc., we don't know anything about. Depending on how long a battle takes, I can imagine it only really being worth using one of these if there's some major slip-up that you've made in the last, 10 minutes of a battle, to then just go back and fix that. Otherwise, just replay the battle over again, right? Rather than wasting one of these resources. We'll have to see. It's a little bit of an interesting implementation here instead of a just static rewind mechanic. But hey, it could be really good. We'll have to find out. We also now know that certain unit types have certain attack patterns, and we've seen this before with Griffin Knights and their AoE axe sweeps on the front row, but it wasn't clear how prolific this was going to be. Now, though, we've learned that spear users can actually strike through the front line to hit the backline unit behind their target as well, which may incentivize creative placement of tanks and clerics or mages or other squishy units in the back, depending on who's being targeted where. Seeing as how we only have 6 slots that we can put units in, this may become fairly unavoidable as you fill out your squads, but it is something to consider depending on what your most likely target is in your front line and who the squishiest units might be in your back line. Thanks to this early scene here, we can see some examples of high-level units. There is HP in the 90s, even breaking 100 in the case of Queen Elenia, and 257 for Boss Valmore, as well as every unit having only 2 active points, but sometimes as many as 4 passive points. From what we've seen of unit menus, it definitely looks like you can go up to 4 active points, so this might not even be the top end of what units can reach. It might just be like a middle point. We'll have to find out, but obviously we're going to get some pretty big numbers in there. Nothing close to any insane grinding Disgaea numbers from what we've seen, which is just super over the top in my opinion, but there will at least be some pretty decent growth in here. We've seen here that witches have the passive ability Magic Conferral that can make other units' attacks deal magic damage, bypassing armor. And this one is absolutely going to be pretty powerful, and I imagine a pretty key strategy, seeing as how you can get witches pretty early on from everything that we've seen. I've talked previously in my how to make armor units good in Unicorn Overlord video, or at least how I think that Unicorn Overlord is going to be doing it, that not having as much magic damage or anti-armor effects in this game compared to things like Fire Emblem would help armor units be way more powerful. Now, though, if you can just slap a witch into a party and be like, hey, my frontline carry, their melee attacks are just magical now, that could be a problem. That could be a problem for our armor unit hopefuls out there. So we'll have to see exactly how much of an impact this has, but I mean, we've seen scenes where an armor unit is taking maybe scratch damage, 1-2 damage from attacks, and then a witch gives magic conferral to your own armor unit, and they just stab through for a huge chunk of damage. So it could be a problem. We'll have to see. There might be anti-magic effects you can put on your armor knights to kind of mitigate this. Who knows? But I thought it was an interesting point to make. Speaking of other unit abilities, we have a number that we're going to go through here. Soldiers, as I'm calling them, your foot soldiers with lances, have a long thrust ability that uses active points, but to do what, I'm not necessarily sure. It may just be your damaging piercing attack we talked about previously. I didn't see any other effects pop up, but it's always possible that I just missed it. Figured it would be worth mentioning as a result. Knights have a warding slash ability that deals damage and increases their physical defense, as well as an arrow cover ability, which we can see protecting Ochlis. I still am not quite sure how to pronounce this name. Apologies if I've been corrected, but I haven't seen it at this point. I'm going to say Ochlis for now. From a Hunter Shot, very cool. Reminds me of Knights in Tactics Ogre with their Phalanx and Rampart Aura abilities, kind of really interposing themselves between you and your enemy, which is going to be fun. In turn here, we can see that Ochilus uses the Accelerate skill to improve her own accuracy and initiative. She also has the Spiral Sword ability that deals damage and increases her evasion. Seems to me that there's going to be a lot of buffs and debuffs flying around in Unicorn Overlord, so knowing what's going to be coming your way when and how to mitigate the effects while also inflicting your opponent with debuffs and all that type of stuff is going to be very important, I would imagine. Clive the Cavalier here is notable for his Assaulting Lance, which seems to grant him another point of AP. This is the first that I've seen such an ability in the game, and I can only imagine it has a limit to the number of times it can trigger per turn, or it would be literally endless, and Clive would be the strongest unit in the game, or as well as any other unit that has this ability. As we now know, battles end when every playable unit in the battle has run out of action points, so if Clive could just give himself active points like that, seems like it's going to be a problem. There's got to be some sort of limit here we'll find out about. Other mounted knights may also have an ability, Pile Thrust, that appears to attack 3 times successively. However, this could also be a unique skill of Renault of the Queen's Retinue, so we'll have to see. Soldiers, or maybe their promoted form, also seem to have a ranged javelin attack they can use from the back row, which I imagine will be useful, seeing as how they seem to be more of a supporting class with attack buffs and healing than necessarily a frontline unit, but we'll see. Healing abilities, we've learned, can actually trigger at the end of the battle so long as you have the appropriate points remaining, even if all enemies have been defeated, so you don't need to worry too much about getting healing in between fights, which is a nice quality of life touch. On this map here, we can see how truly huge Unicorn Overlord's battles are going to be. While at a very early stage, we can see there are multiple forts and objectives to seize along the way to the main objective, to say nothing of the number of enemy troops that will be coming your way. I can only imagine as we get later into the game, these maps are going to balloon in size and the number of troops at play, really hammering home that feeling of actually being at war. Also, when engaging in a skirmish with an enemy squad, if you have 2 or more squads in combat range, you can actually choose which squad will engage in battle at will. This will obviously be great, as it allows you to choose exactly the right squad for the job in any given scenario, and it will also encourage some measure of sticking together and holding formation. Now, the thing to keep in mind with that is if enemies are going to have access to battlefield fixtures that deal AoE damage, or Valor abilities that deal AoE damage, which might mean that you wouldn't want to keep your units all clumped together, but as always, in any strategy game, there's going to be some push and pull here. We'll have to see. You may also choose to auto-skip a battle if it clearly falls in your favor, speeding battles up dramatically, I would imagine. We see a new action in ranged assist here, used by Hunter Rolf to pepper foes with arrows. The catch is that Rolf is not participating in the battle, so this must be another skill that Rolf can use to support allies. Fortunately, we see later on in Noisy Pixel's coverage that this is actually an activatable skill you can trigger when Rolf's squad is in range of another squad that's about to do battle. Notably, we also see that Yana the Witch can take a similar action with magical assist, and that clerics can use ranged assist to heal an allied squad. So, seems like a thing that most ranged squads are going to be able to do in general, and should be a nice little power boost for them. Speaking of Rolf, we can see here that he is ensconced in a set of 3 barricades, which is even denoted with a special icon here. These barricades can be seen as well covering an enemy squad, reducing the damage they take and knocking back attackers up to 3 times before the barricade is expended. Nice, if temporary, defensive terrain, and it seems like something we may be able to set up at will as well, because we've actually seen these barricades in our inventories before. Notably, there is some sort of a buff that we can see here above Rolf's head, named Hastened Call. Since this is a timed buff, it tells me it's probably some kind of overworld map buff as opposed to a combat buff. Maybe it increases your move speed, hard to say, but this is the first instance of this kind of buff that I recall seeing, so I figured it was worth pointing out. When targeting an enemy in battle, you can see a list of buffs, debuffs, and conditions applied to said unit, and while I can't read Japanese, I'm sure you'll be able to get a quick glance at what's up with any given squad by hovering over them and make good tactical decisions based on that instead of having to go into a menu, which is excellent. Big thumbs up there. It may also be important to hold some units back in your base camp in case of ambushes or assaults from the side. In this clip here, we can see a Griffin Knight and her squad charging the home base, and we did learn, if your home base gets captured, it's game over. While the player tries to intercept, his units are not quick enough to do so, so he instead actually deploys Clive's unit from the base to intercept instead. In this stage here, we can see a full round of battles against enemy boss Renault and how important it will be to have many squads to attack such targets. Having enough actions to deplete the enemy's guard actions and punch through their defenses could be tough, especially as stamina runs low, so you're going to want to make sure that you're actually prepped and ready before you engage the boss in battle. Remember, if you lose an engagement, your team will be put in a bit of a back foot stunned state, and if they get attacked there, the enemy is going to get the guaranteed first round of actions. So you don't want to let it come to that if you have any choice. bring your whole party to the boss fight if possible and try and bring them down quickly. Finally, we've also seen some training battles occurring between allied units here, presumably to allow for the increase of rapport or XP gains, among other things. Although it may also just be a way to test your tactics setups, which we spoke about earlier with stratagems. We'll have to see. I don't notice any gains of rapport or XP after these fights, so it may just be a way of testing the way your stratagems are going to work after you get them set up. And man, I feel like I powered through that incredibly quickly, but that is a full video's worth of extra miscellaneous information that I was able to glean from all of this pre-release footage. Do you have any questions, any concerns, anything else that you've noticed about any of the footage I showed or that anyone else has shown in any of their preview type material? Let me know. I dug through all of this information as fast as I possibly could, and there is absolutely no guarantee that there's things I didn't miss. So, if you see something interesting, drop it in the comments. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future video. What are your thoughts on all of this? I know people have been incredibly excited. I love seeing what all of these new abilities that these units are going to have will be. It's really starting to paint a picture of how combat flow is going to go and the important ways you're going to be building out your squads and your stratagem plans. With that said, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. We're getting real close to March 8th. Remember, we will be streaming the game on March 8th. As soon as it comes out, I will be live constantly. Whenever I'm not live, I'll be doing videos. It's just going to be days straight of Unicorn Overlord coverage, so I hope you are as excited for that as I am. With that said, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.